We're going to start here, actually not far from where I live. This is Standard Bank at 95th and Western. This is a building that sort of typifies the kind of modernism that I'm talking about. Not necessarily the Mies van der Rohe stuff or the SOM stuff. I mean, these buildings are going to be protected. Buildings like the Inland Steel Building, John Hancock Building, by hook or by crook or by condominium, they're going to be protected. What I'm curious about and more concerned about for the sake of our conversation today and generally is the kind of the everyday and the ordinary modernism that we see in our neighborhoods and towns that we might not really give much thought to. Now, this was, again, at 95th and Western, building built by Standard Bank. It was Standard Bank building was the name of it, as you can see from the top. By an architect named Louis Bartolomeo. Great building, there's great circular banking hall, lobby here, offices at the top. You can see the elements that sort of jut out. 95th Street goes by here. And what happened to this building was this. You can see the great lobby just gone, and then a day or two later, we've got this. And what was built on the site was a replacement bank, which one of my readers, when I talked about this on my WBEZ blog, said it looked like a Subaru dealership to him. Just sort of a solid building, but one that wasn't this. So preservation of mid-century modern buildings is, to me, preservation's new battleground. It's its current battleground. Keeping in mind that the oldest post-war buildings are around 63 years old. The youngest post-war buildings, we think of Prentice, are about 35 years old. So even then, even the younger of these buildings are kind of reaching that age where they need to be preserved. 50 would be sort of the cutoff where a building is 50 years or older can be considered for landmark status. But of course, distinctive buildings like the Inland Steel Building, for instance, can get landmark status a lot younger. Now, this was the building that sort of sparked my interest as a child. This is Pride Cleaners at 79th and St. Lawrence, built in 1958. Now, as you can imagine, 79th Street in the city is a sort of a classic, Chicago street of buildings of around 1920 vintage or a little bit before. This building lands in 1958 and clearly shakes things up a little bit. It was designed by George Siegert, and the good thing about this building is, and many of the ones that you'll see in this sort of first chapter, is that it's owned by an owner who hasn't preserved the building. I mean, he hasn't fixed it up terribly, but he hasn't mucked anything up either. So it has many of the original colors and signage and neon on the inside. The great sign outside, which does not work, but he hasn't torn it down, so that's good. Some of the craziest and my favorite spots to watch mid-century modern architecture is Peterson and Lincoln Avenue. So here's this funny, great building, actually office building, Peterson Corporate Center on Peterson West, I guess around 3800 West. And then up and down the street there, you find all kinds of interesting things, like this detail from this professional building where the bricks kind of leap out, at you, and then there's this great treatment near the roof. I just like this because radio, I mean, to name something radio probably then was really cool, right? It was, and now it's radio, no wires or nothing, right? But I like the symmetry of the building. Obviously, the building and the sign sort of become one, and these are kind of the hallmarks of this kind of architecture. The good news is, as we've seen, is that thank God, there are enlightened private owners who don't have much, who haven't been given incentive, but they know what they've got and they like it. There are also committed public officials and agencies, including one that'll surprise you, that take care of these buildings pretty well, and of course, enlightened institutional owners. Now I'm going to go out to Park Ridge for this house, which is hands down my favorite house in Cook County. That if this house were on fire, I'd be the first guy with the bucket brigade to save it. It's on D Road in Park Ridge. This house was featured prominently in Crime Story. Most of the first season of the show was filmed here, and they were masterful at picking up mid-century buildings that still existed and making them part of the show. Here are the two actors. This is David Caruso when he was really young, and Anthony Dennison outside of the house that we just saw. I think the cinematographer had something going on with the hair and the angles of the house there. So here are buildings that, may raise your hackles a little bit. These are buildings that are either in danger, they're gone, or my fear is that they'll be gone. This is a bank building at 108th and Western, around my house actually in Beverly. This is a building that I'm fearful of. This is another Bertrand Goldberg building. This is a portion of his Elgin Mental Health Center out in Elgin. Here's a research center in Harvey, Illinois that's demolished. This was a research center it became for Amoco and Standard Oil. And this is where all kinds of breakthroughs and using oil and petroleum products for stuff like gel caps and other things was pioneered here. And as you can see, it's fallen in. What are the next steps? What do you think? I think now with whatever camera you have, whether you shoot with something fancy or just an iPhone or a BlackBerry, to get out, identify these buildings. If you want to research them, the Cook County Assessor's Office has an online database. You can find out the date of construction for these buildings. The Chicago Tribune's archives, which used to be terribly expensive, but now if you subscribe to the paper, you can access the archives unlimited for free. And it's great for finding out when things were built. And then also publicize and mobilize. Alert fellow preservation groups and preservationists about buildings that are in danger. Meet with owners if you can. Explain the building's importance to the owners when you meet with them. Tell the news media when all possible. But most importantly, create your own media. Blogs, websites, whatever, that draw attention to this overlooked and I think fantastic form of architecture.